With that being said, again, this is the 2026-27 General Operating Support Application Workshop. Before we get into the workshop, I do want to take a moment to introduce our team that we have today with us. Today we have Jake Sinatra, who is our Director of Grant Making, Laura Matteo, who is our Communications Manager, Elisa Gottner, not pictured on the screen, but she is joining our team as a Cleveland Foundation intern this summer, and we currently have two grant managers, myself, Davon Nichols, and Maya Curtis, who will also be presenting in this workshop today. Each CAC grant manager has a portfolio of about 100 organizations that we work with throughout the grant cycle. So please reach out to any of us if you're unsure who your grant manager is or if you need more assistance. If you are a returning grantee, you probably already have a grant manager assigned to you as your primary contact at CAC. But if you're a first-time applicant, feel free to reach out to any of us and we'll be of assistance to you. A grant manager will be assigned if you're new to applications once you have completed the application process. Also, if you are a new contact for your organization, we will also assist you with finding who your grant manager is. We'll drop a link in the chat so that you can get our contact information. Also, before we get into the actual workshop, we want to acknowledge the land that we stand on and the place that we call Cuyahoga County as land that is acclaimed by and the United States governments through forced displacement and treaties negotiated in bad faith. We acknowledge those of the Shawnee, Miami, Erie, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Haudenosaunee Confederacy whose lands we stand on, and the thousands of Native Americans representing over 100 tribes who currently live in Ohio, Northeast Ohio today. We thank the Lake Erie Native American Council for helping us develop this acknowledgement. We also want to take a moment to share that CAC values equity. We choose to lead with racial equity in our work because the creation and perpetuation of racial inequalities is embedded into government and grant making. We confront the white supremacy that resides in our work because racial inequities across all indicators of success are deep and pervasive. We also recognize the power and potential that organizations who produce arts and cultural programming have as bearers of culture. These institutions have the power to write the narrative about who belongs and who is valued. We encourage our organizations to connect with resources to advance equity in their work. Please visit cacgrants.org/equity or contact a grants manager to learn more. We'll also drop a link in the chat for your guys' reference. Again, welcome to everyone joining us this afternoon. I hope this workshop will be helpful to you and your organizations as we prepare for CAC's application deadline. In today's workshop, we'll give an overview of CAC's 2026-27 General Operating Support Program and the application process. We'll outline what to expect after the application, including important notes and dates, and of course, we'll leave room for questions at the end. However, if you have a burning question, please feel free to leave it in the chat and we'll reference back at the end. So the purpose of Cuyahoga Arts and Culture's General Operating Support Grant is to strengthen the community by connecting residents to arts and culture through meaningful multi-year core support to arts and cultural nonprofits based in serving Cuyahoga County. It's flexible funding. You can use it to fund your public arts and culture programming broadly, or you can use it for organizational costs. For 2026, CAC's objective is to continue to prioritize flexible, unrestricted funding for arts and culture nonprofits through this program. General operating support grants are open to 501c3 organizations with a core mission of arts and culture as determined by CAC. In the chat, we'll drop a link to the core mission determination document that provides more detail, but we'll also circle back to this later in the webinar today, or the workshop today. The grants may range up to from $5,000 up to $20,000, and from $20,000 up to $1 million for nonprofit organizations based in Cuyahoga County based on your budget, staffing, and CAC grant history. All grant amounts are subject to available funding and pending CAC board approval or Board of Trustees approval. A SMA Data Arts Funder report is required for all organizations. So this will be something that we'll discuss later in the workshop, but please take note of that. General operating support grants are matching grants. For grants of $5,000 or less, 50% of the match can be met through in-kind income. In-kind income can include donated goods, services, space, and volunteer hours. All grants more than $5,000 must be a cash match, though. While CAC's funding priorities remain unchanged from previous years, it's important to note that General Operating Support Grant Program has no panel process. Applicants will use their applications and reports throughout the grant cycle to demonstrate their alignment with CAC's funding priorities in relation to their CAC grant. The funding criteria for General Operating Support applicants should be applied to the whole organization and its programming. Once approved for funding, General Operating Support grantees will use these priorities to set goals and to report throughout the grant year. So with that, CAC's funding priorities are public benefit, or organization's ability to meaningfully connect with its community to achieve its mission; artistic and cultural vibrancy, an organization's ability to create relevant and engaging work that furthers its mission; and organizational capacity, an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its resources. As a public funder, centering residents is core to our work. We work to ensure grant recipients foster a sense of belonging for all residents through their publicly funded activities. For this reason, public benefit is the most heavily emphasized funding priority. Although not a funding priority, we value organizations that demonstrate belonging in their work, so we want to clarify what we mean by that. We define this and several other important terms in our glossary, which is linked in the guidelines, and we share this in the chat as well. It includes words like diverse, sharing power, community, and others. Belonging is an unwavering commitment to not simply tolerating and respecting difference, but to ensure that all people are welcome and feel that they belong in a given space. This graphic that you see here comes from John A. Powell and the Othering and Belonging Institute. It's an example of that. Belonging is not just about inviting people into the circle, but expanding it and bringing more chairs in. It's about bridging between differences, not saming, requiring people to change or to integrate. And it's about co-creating and co-owning. In organizations and institutions, this concept should be present at all levels, not just in the education or outreach department, but especially in leadership where power is held. Belonging in practice will look different at many organizations, but it will not include tokenizing people of color, extractive partnerships with smaller organizations, and/or outreach programs to communities where you have no trust and relationships built. I will now turn it over to Maya to discuss arts and culture more specifically and its relevance to your application.
Thank you, Devon. So what is arts and culture? Arts and culture is defined in the Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 3381, which is CAC's enabling law, as including but not limited to literature, theater, music, dance, ballet, painting, sculpture, photography, motion pictures, architecture, archaeology, history, natural history, or the natural sciences. Our definition is broad and can include many different types of projects, but we do have specific determinations of what is and isn't arts and culture. It's also important to point out that CAC's definition of arts and culture includes natural history and the natural sciences. This means that we fund historical, nature, and science-based programming, in addition to other disciplines like music, performing arts, and visual art. Your core mission as it relates to CAC and its definition of arts and culture is determined by CAC during the application process. If you have questions, please contact CAC staff. Through our application process, CAC determines if an organization demonstrates it has a core mission of arts and culture. To be eligible for operating support, each organization must have a core mission of arts and culture articulated in their articles of incorporation and backed up by other publicly available materials that their core mission fits within this definition of arts and culture. In the chat, we'll share a link to our core mission determination guide. But for now, we want to highlight some of the areas where we extract information from to make this determination. This includes your organization's mission statement, articles of incorporation, your website, IRS Form 990, NTEE codes, which include subject areas and mission as listed on GuideStar, and other publicly available material. There is no application or appeal process for this determination, but please reach out to grant managers with questions. If your organization is determined not to demonstrate it has a core mission of arts and culture, but is still eligible for funding from CAC, grant managers will reach out to you to recommend applying for continued project support funding. This can place emphasis on submitting your application as soon as possible so that you will have the time to submit required materials for project support should you still decide to apply. This year, the application is one step and streamlined. We aren't going to go through each question, but we will go over each section. You can see the full list of questions within the General Operating Support Guidelines starting on page 10. Thank you for dropping that in the chat. The application is available now in our online application and reporting system, and we'll drop the link to that as well. And we'll start with the organizational overview, which is the first part of your application. This is going to include your mission statement, organizational information, and organizational history. This is where you will also provide contact information for the executive director and board information. Then you'll move on to the eligibility questions. This is the next section. Because this year the application is a one-step process, you will see familiar previous eligibility questions. And as a reminder, this information asks about your base of operations and authorizations with the IRS and Secretary of State. This section will then continue and require you to submit your organizational or financial support materials. You'll share your board of directors list, including their professional affiliations, your 23-24 990 filings, your current fiscal year board approved organizational budget, and you'll also share the SMU Data Arts Funders Report with a minimum of fiscal year 24 data profile in complete status. All GOS applicants will be required to participate in the SMU Data Arts annual survey. However, at the time of the application, it will be optional to submit it by July 31st. You will have the option to submit by September 30th for just the SMU Data Arts part. We always encourage early submissions. The CAC Funder Reports is generated from your cultural data profile. This is a free and secure online survey of financial and programmatic information about your organization. The system puts that information into a standardized report, making it easy for the grant team to see extensive data about your organization in a clear and consistent format. It takes some time to complete, but it is an incredibly valuable tool for both soliciting funding and for organizations to understand their own finances. We recommend getting started on this early since there might be some further information gathering once you've gotten started. SMU Data Arts has a ton of support to help applicants complete this survey for the first time, and we have an instruction document we will share with you here on how to access it and those resources. So this is a slide from our Grant Opportunities Workshop you can view now on YouTube. We will not go back over all these details. However, we included this slide to reiterate how detailed and specific each award amount required documents impact your grant. And we'll include the Grant Opportunities Workshop link. You can also find this information detailed on page 7 of the grant guidelines. Just note that all general operating support grant amounts are determined by an organization's budget size as determined by an applicant's IRS 990 filing, audit, or independent financial reviews and accompanying eligible revenue and support form. CAC will determine grant range eligibility through the application process based on the financial documentation provided and applicant budget size. All grant amounts are subject to CAC board approval and available funding. This year, we have included an organizational capacity and governance checklist. This checklist is derived from IRS standards and governance best practices, and it will allow grant managers to have an upfront understanding on how your organization's boards operate. While your responses to this section do not impact grant eligibility, we ask that you complete it accurately and use the comment section to offer explanations if helpful. Your answers will allow for grant managers to understand your current operations and track updates or progress during your grant period. This gives opportunity for transparency as well as allowing organizations to express their alignment with one of our funding criteria, which is organizational capacity. Organizational capacity is an organization's ability to successfully plan for and manage its resources. And it's important to ensure that we're being good stewards of public dollars and that organizations we grant to can receive and carefully manage those dollars. So what's next after the application? Keep in mind that all applications are due Thursday, July 31st at 4:30 p.m. Late and incomplete applications will not be accepted. Once applications are submitted, grant managers complete a first review of general operating support applications to make sure all required materials are submitted. Program recommendations will be conducted at this time, but this is not when approvals will be recommended. The next deadline will be September 30th. This deadline provides grant managers to review submissions. If you did not submit your required SMU Data Arts Funder Report to CAC by July 31st, you will need to submit it by September 30th. There will be no extensions. We strongly encourage you to submit it with the application to get it out of the way. But if you need that additional time, please note that September 30th deadline is available to you. Organizations with revenues over $200,000 will be required to submit additional financial documentations, including the eligible revenue and support form, which is a form we use to determine grant recommendations. CAC will reach out to you directly to complete this step. After all applications have been reviewed with all required materials, grant managers will then give funding recommendations to the board. Recommendations are then approved at a public meeting of our Board of Trustees, typically held in November. The 2026 grant year begins on January 1st and ends December 31st. Grant agreements are issued each year, and grantees will not be able to receive funding until those agreements are reviewed, signed, and returned back to CAC. Your grant manager will work with you throughout the process, and we have specific reporting requirements for GOS grantees, including mid-year and year-end reports. Again, as a reminder, you can find this information and more in our 2026 guidelines document. With that, we thank you for joining us today and welcome any questions you may have.